Today, we're going to go through how you can use AI automation to automatically monitor the news and turn it into either news articles, blog posts, or newsletters. So the overall concept for this is pretty straightforward. Basically, you need some way to monitor news articles on a certain topic or niche. You need some way to extract those news articles, and then you need some way to pass that into a large language model such as GPT-4o to then turn into the format of your choice, whether that's a newsletter or another blog post, whatever you want. So today we're going to go through that step by step, and I'm going to walk through and explain everything I'm doing. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll try my best to get back to you. So it all starts with monitoring the news. And for that, we're going to use the Dumpling AI Google News module. And here you just kind of have to determine the topic or industry or niche that you're interested in. So maybe I run a newsletter that just monitors news on OpenAI. So I would write OpenAI as my search query. Now, depending on the frequency of what you're building, so if I was doing a blog post, then the date range doesn't matter too much, right? Because it's a one-off. If I was doing a weekly newsletter, then potentially with the date range, I'd only want the news for the past week every time I run this automation. In terms of narrowing this down further, I might narrow it to country is US and language is ETN. Limit here just determines how many news articles I'll get. So usually I think you would run this with maybe 10 articles, but just for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to put this as 3 just so that the automation runs a bit faster as we do our testing. So let's run that quickly to see what we get back. So here you can see I've already got 3 different bundles, so 3 different news articles on OpenAI. So we've got OpenAI and Haast content partnership, the bear case for their funding, and then projections around their loss and all that sort of stuff. So cool, I've got the articles now, but if you look here, you can see that this is just the snippet and the title. We don't actually have the contents of those articles. So if we want to transform those news articles into a different format, whether that's a blog post or a newsletter, we will need the actual contents of those pages. So we do need to scrape each individual URL. So that's what we're going to do next. So to do that, we're going to use the scrape URL module in Dumpling AI. And here I'm just going to pass in the URL that I got from the first block. So link is the URL. And what I want is the markdown. And I'm just going to say you don't need to clean the data. We can just get all the markdown. And press OK there. And let's quickly run this again just to make sure it works. So we've got the news articles again, and it should sort of scrape each of the 3 news articles that we're passing in here and getting the full contents of those news articles. Now, depending on the site that is being scraped, sometimes it can take a little bit of time, but usually it's sort of each site, I would say, averages around 10 seconds to scrape all the contents of that web page. Cool. So now that's running, let's talk about the next step. So after this step, we should have the contents of the different news articles that we passed in. So the next step for us is to pass all of those news articles into a large language model, and we're going to use GPT-4o. And what we're going to do there is going to get GPT-4o to turn those articles into a newsletter. So in this tutorial, what we're going to pretend is, sometimes it will fail depending on the sites that you are scraping. And that's just because some of the sites will time out. And sometimes it doesn't really matter. So maybe we'll just run it again, see if it's still timing out. But basically, we want to take all of those news articles and we want to pass it into a large language model and get it to extract out the key points of each news article and then turn it into a newsletter. So depending on what you're doing, the prompt will be slightly different. For this use case, I'm taking it in like lots of different news articles and doing like a weekly recap newsletter. So it ran successfully this time. So I click in, you can see we've got the content for each news article. So if I scroll down here, there's all the content for this piece. So what I need to do next is actually do the ChatGPT completion. So I'm going to do create a completion. We're going to use GPT-4o mini. You can test different models if you want here. I find that GPT-4o mini is usually enough. And for my system prompt, which is sort of like the instructions for the AI, I'm going to say, please extract the key points from each is the news articles provided and provide a summary recap in newsletter format. Down here, I'm just going to pass in the articles that we have. So you can see here, I've only got articles for each individual. I've only got the content for each individual article, but I want to pass it in all in one go. So what I actually need to do is unlink this and add a step in between where I turn the 3 different content outputs into just one big piece of text. I'm going to unlink here, and there it is, a text aggregator module. So let's have an aggregator of text aggregator. I will need to use the original module where these bundles started, and then the text I want to combine is just the title as well as the content. So you can see here, it takes those 3 bundles that I have and turns it into one big text module. So then I can come back here and just pass in the new text module that we have. Now sometimes make.com doesn't update the variable quickly, so I'm just going to copy my prompt here and I'm going to delete this module and re-add it because .com is a bit finicky sometimes. Choose GP4 again, GP4 Mini. I'm going to add in my system prompt. And then here I'm going to put in the content, all the pieces of content here. For the rest, you can do sort of what you usually do, 2000 tokens output, depending on like what length you want, all that sort of stuff. Now, if you just wanted the output for you to look at, this is all you would need to do. But generally speaking, you'll probably want to save the output to Airtable, to your CMS, whether that's WordPress or Webflow, or even just email to yourself. And in those cases, you sometimes will want to reference the title or the content of the output separately. And for that, you will need to use JSON format output. I'm going to choose JSON object here and press parse JSON. So if you are doing JSON output here, you'll actually need to change your prompt. I'm going to say, please respond in JSON format following. It's going to be, we're going to do title, which is string, contents with a string, and then maybe we want an image to go along with our newsletter. So I'm going to say image prompt. That will also be a string. If we're doing an image, we also need to give it some instructions on what we want the image to be like. So I'm going to say the image abstract. Obviously, you can tweak this prompt a lot to get better results, but for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just going to keep it super simple. So we've got that working now. Let's run it from the beginning just to make sure it all works. From here, I should be expecting that I get a JSON output with the title, the content, as well as the image prompt for the newsletter. Now, with the image prompt, I'm going to need to generate an image, so you can decide what image model you want to use. You can use DALL-E 3 with OpenAI, or you can use Flux 1 models, which are very popular these days. I'm going to use the Flux 1 models. So I'm going to press generate image. And in here, I'm going to use Flux 1 now, which is the cheapest model. Depending on your, I guess, costs and budget, you can use a better model for better images. And I'm just going to pass in the image prompt here. And you can choose your image size and all that sort of stuff, really up to you. So I come back here to look at the outputs. You can see in the results, we've got the title, the contents, and then the image prompt. Now, the contents here are not really what I'm looking for. And that really just comes back to the prompting, right? Like if you were doing this for real, you'd want to spend a lot more time on your prompting. So maybe you want something like, you are an experienced newsletter creator that writes a weekly AI email recapping any news on OpenAI. So it might be something like that, really up to you how you want to prompt, but the quality of your prompt will be the major determinant for the quality of your output here. Cool. Anyways, what will happen here is that the image will get generated and then you can save the image to wherever you want, right? So if you want to publish it directly, you can save it to WordPress or Webflow. But in most cases, you won't want to publish the output directly. You want to sort of have a human editing step. So for most people I talk to, they save their outputs to Airtable. And what you can do is go into Airtable. And once you've got your table set up, you can just do create a record. And that way you can just save the outputs into Airtable for you to then review. And once you're done from there, you can auto-publish or you can pass it off to your team, whatever it is there for the output to get published. And that's basically it for this automation. You can obviously tweak what news you're monitoring what type of output you want, whether this runs on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis. And even if you don't want AI to generate text, even running this sort of news monitoring automation on a scheduled basis is very good for staying on top of an industry. So maybe you want to stay on top of the farming industry or like the strawberry industry. You might have a search query here so that anytime there's news on that topic, you get an email notification. So with this build, there's lots of different components. You can take each of the components and build something that suits your use case. It's really up to you. But that's basically it for this build. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. But with that, I'll see you in my next video.